I never thought a wood-burning fireplace would be the thing to tear my marriage apart. Strange, right? Not an argument. Not a scandal. Just a photo of my wife, Arlena, standing too close to a man I had never seen before, with the fire crackling behind them like it was blessing their betrayal. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Wade. I'm not exactly what you'd call a main character kind of guy. I've always been the supporting role, the man who fixes the wobbly kitchen table, who remembers to fill the gas tank before a long drive, who listens more than he talks. I'm not flashy. I'm not interesting. I'm just reliable. And I loved that about myself, even when the world around me seemed obsessed with louder, shinier things. Arlena used to love it too. At least, that's what she said every time she pulled me in close during lazy Sunday mornings, her breath warm against my ear, murmuring about how safe she felt with me. Safe. I guess somewhere along the line, safe started feeling a lot like boring. 2 weeks ago, she came to me with the idea of a women's retreat in Vermont. Yoga classes, journaling workshops, campfire talks under the stars. She made it sound like a reset button for her soul. I'll admit, the way her eyes lit up when she talked about it made me feel good, like I was the kind of husband who encouraged growth instead of clinging to comfort. So I smiled and helped her pack, even picked out that dusty rose dress she barely ever wore anymore. She twirled once in front of me before zipping up her suitcase, laughing when I told her she looked like something out of a romance novel. The night she left, I stood in the driveway long after her taillights disappeared. I missed her already, and that old familiar ache, the one I thought we'd outgrown, settled in my chest like a stubborn guest. I tried to distract myself, took the dogs to the park, raked the last stubborn leaves from the backyard, even tried starting a DIY project in the garage, and quickly remembered why I'm not allowed near power tools unsupervised. I told myself she'd be home soon, rested and happy, and that maybe we could finally plan that trip to the coast we kept putting off. But life doesn't wait for your plans to catch up. On the second night she was gone, I got a message from a guy I barely knew, Drew, a friend of a friend we met once at a charity event. The message was short. No greeting, no explanation, just one image attached, and 4 words. Thought you should see. I hesitated before opening it. Somehow, even then, I knew it would be bad. And there it was. Arlena, in the dusty rose dress. Not in a yoga class, not journaling by a lakeside, but pressed against a stranger's chest in front of a massive stone fireplace. His hands were low on her back. Her head was tilted, her smile lazy, familiar ours, once. Now, on full display for someone else. It wasn't even the touch that killed me. It was the way she looked at him, like he was her home now. I stared at that photo so long the screen went dark. I turned it back on. Stared again. My mind started spinning useless questions. Who was he? How long had it been going on? Was the retreat even real, or just a story she rehearsed in the mirror until she could say it without blinking? I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there on the kitchen floor, back against the cabinets, feeling like my body weighed twice what it should. And after a while, a thought floated up through the wreckage. Don't confront her. Not yet. If Arlena wanted to live in lies, I'd build her the prettiest little stage to dance on. I wouldn't tear down the set. I would make her reveal the whole truth, willingly, piece by piece, trap by trap. The hardest part wasn't pretending I didn't know. The hardest part was pretending I didn't feel it. Every word I spoke, every glance I gave her, every casual text. It all had to be the same Wade she had kissed goodbye in the driveway. I had to become a man she wouldn't suspect was crumbling inside. The night before Arlena was supposed to return, I made the house look exactly as it should. Fresh groceries in the fridge. The bed made perfectly with the throw blanket folded at the foot, just how she liked it. Even a small bouquet of sunflowers on the kitchen table, her favorite. I wanted her to step into a world so normal it would lull her into carelessness. I rehearsed my face in the mirror, relaxed, welcoming, oblivious, and when I finally heard the crunch of tires on gravel outside, my heart hammered so loudly I thought she might hear it through the door. She came in with a duffel bag slung over her shoulder and a bright, weary smile. "Hey, babe," she chirped. tossing her keys onto the counter. I noticed the faint tan line where her wedding ring had been. It was back on her finger now, but slightly looser, like it had been off for too long. "Hey, welcome home," I said, pulling her into a hug. I held her a second too long, hoping to feel something. Familiarity, comfort, love. But what I felt was her stiff hesitation before she melted into the embrace, the way you might hug a relative you barely know at a family reunion. As we sat down for dinner, she launched into stories about the retreat. The yoga instructor who made them do soul-cleansing breathing exercises. The disastrous hike that ended with 3 women stuck in the mud. The nightly fireside chats about gratitude and forgiveness. I smiled. I nodded. I laughed at all the right moments. But inside I took notes. Every lie was another thread in the noose she was weaving around herself. After dessert, as she stretched and yawned theatrically, she said she was exhausted and needed to crash early. I kissed her forehead, tucked her into bed, and sat in the living room alone for a long time, staring at the fireplace. Fireplaces. Always fireplaces. Around 1 a.m., when the house had long since fallen silent, I tiptoed into her purse. I didn't rifle like a madman. I moved slowly, surgically. Found her phone tucked deep in the side pocket. It wasn't locked, she trusted me too much. That almost broke me more than anything else. Her photos were squeaky clean. Deleted. Scrubbed. Nothing from the retreat except posed group shots in broad daylight. Smiling faces. Yoga mats. Bonfires. Not a trace of the man by the hearth. But I knew better. I checked her emails. Nothing. I checked the Notes app. Harmless shopping lists. Finally, in the depths of her cloud backups, I found it, the automatic uploads she had forgotten existed. Hidden folders. Unsorted files. There were more photos. Not just one. Photos of her and that man. Sitting together on a couch. His arm casually slung around her, her bare feet tucked under his thigh. Her head on his shoulder while he kissed the top of her hair. Photos of them drinking wine by the fireplace. Dancing in the kitchen. Her laughing at something he whispered in her ear. And then a video. Shaky hands. Her voice, breathy with laughter. "We shouldn't," she said, but there was no conviction behind it. The clip ended before anything more happened. But it didn't need to continue. The world as I knew it had already ended. I sat there in the dark, her phone still warm in my hands, realizing the woman asleep upstairs wasn't the woman I had married. Maybe she hadn't been for a long time. I didn't smash the phone. I didn't storm into the bedroom screaming. I set it back carefully, exactly where it had been. I tucked her purse back into its place. And then I went to the garage. Because it was time to set the second part of the trap. The garage smelled like sawdust and old oil, a scent that once brought me comfort but now made my stomach churn. I sat down at my workbench, the one Arlena had once teased me about for looking like an old man's sanctuary. Maybe she had been right. Maybe I was the old man already, trusting, slow, predictable. But tonight, I wasn't any of those things. I needed a plan. A plan that wouldn't just catch her, but would leave no room for excuses, no dark corners where the truth could hide. Screaming matches and broken plates weren't my style. I wanted her to look at me and realize, quietly, devastatingly, that her lies had finally run out of air. My first move was subtle. The next morning, while she was in the shower, I called an old friend of mine, Bo, who worked in private security. We hadn't spoken in years, but he owed me a favor. I told him I needed a tracking device. Nothing fancy. Nothing too obvious. Just something small enough to slip into a bag or a coat lining without being noticed. He didn't ask questions. By that afternoon, I had what I needed. The device was no bigger than a thumb drive. It could track in real time, uploading her location to an app on my phone. I felt sick installing it, but I forced my hands steady. I stitched it into the lining of her favorite weekend tote, the one she always brought to girls' nights and open house events she claimed to be helping with. If she was meeting him again, I would know. Days passed. Arlena fell back into our routines as if nothing had happened. Smiling over morning coffee. Sending me sweet texts in the middle of workdays. Laughing at sitcoms on the couch with her head resting lightly against my shoulder. To an outsider, we were the picture of a healthy marriage. But under the surface, every word she spoke felt rehearsed, like lines she practiced in the mirror while checking her lipstick. I played my part well too. Never once let on that anything had changed. We even made love one night, and it nearly broke me because for the first time in years it felt mechanical. She wasn't there with me. She was somewhere else entirely. Maybe with him. And then on a Thursday evening it happened. She said she had a late showing, an expensive property on the edge of town, and she might be back late. Kissed me goodbye in the hallway, promised to call if it ran too long. I smiled, wished her luck. The moment her car turned the corner, I opened the app. The little blue dot didn't head toward the suburbs. It moved northwest toward the mountains again, toward the same area where the so-called retreat had been. I grabbed my jacket, my keys, and followed. The drive was silent except for the hum of the tires and the roaring in my ears. Every second that passed, I imagined her laughing again, leaning into another man, her hands tracing patterns on someone else's skin. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. She stopped at a cabin tucked deep into the woods, miles from any main road. A place where you could scream and no one would hear you. A place built for secrets. I parked far enough away not to be seen and moved through the trees, each step measured, silent. I didn't bring a weapon. I didn't need one. Truth was the only blade I intended to wield tonight. From the cover of the woods I could see the cabin through the trees. Warm light spilled from the windows, golden and welcoming. The same kind of firelight that had exposed her the first time. And there she was. Arlena. Laughing, spinning in that same dusty rose dress, barefoot on the hardwood floor. Her hair was undone, her makeup soft, her face radiant in a way I hadn't seen in years. Dancing with the same man from the photo, his hands comfortably resting on her hips as if they'd done this 1,000 times before. My chest felt like it would cave in. They weren't careful. They weren't cautious. They weren't afraid. Why would they be? In their minds, they had already buried me under layers of lies and easy smiles. I stood there for a long time, long enough for the night air to soak through my jacket until my teeth started to chatter. And that's when the second part of my plan clicked into place. It wasn't enough to know. I had to make her confess. Publicly. Completely. So I turned and walked back to my car, already crafting the next move in my head, one she would never see coming. Driving home from the cabin was the longest hour of my life. I kept glancing at the screen on my dashboard, half expecting the little blue dot to start moving, chasing me down like some ghost of guilt. But Arlena stayed put in her secret little love nest, utterly oblivious that her husband wasn't snoring safely in their marital bed, but instead mapping out her downfall with every mile. When I got back to the house, the familiar comfort of our suburban street felt different. Like the place itself knew what had been done. Our porch light flickered against the dark, a small mechanical reminder of how everything that had seemed secure was now cracked at the foundation. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at my laptop, fingers hovering over the keyboard. I had to be smart. This couldn't be a sloppy emotional explosion. It had to be undeniable. Clean. Precise. A bullet of truth she couldn't dodge. First, I dug into the public property records. The cabin was owned by a man named Brendan Clay. I found a few articles about him, small-time entrepreneur, divorced, rumored to be a bit of a womanizer. It all fit too perfectly. I scoured his social media, pulling every tagged post, every geotagged photo, every piece of breadcrumb he had ever carelessly left out in the open. Then I went deeper, hiring a discreet online investigator to pull anything private. Dating app profiles, financial records, emails. By dawn, I had enough to paint a vivid picture. Brendan wasn't just a fling. He was actively looking for women, married ones especially. It was almost like a hobby for him. There were chat logs, invitations, casual hookups documented with alarming shamelessness. And Arlena? She wasn't his first married project. But I didn't stop there. I created a new email account, one she wouldn't recognize. A simple burner address. And using the photos I had found, screenshots of them dancing, drinking, tangled up in each other, I drafted a message. No threats. No accusations. Just a single line. You might want to tell Wade before someone else does. Attached were the pictures, each one cropped carefully to make the betrayal unavoidable yet vague enough that she'd have no idea who had sent it. I scheduled it to send to her primary email on Friday afternoon, right when she would be stuck at a weekly business meeting and unable to react immediately. I wanted her cornered. Surrounded by colleagues. No privacy. No escape. While the clock ticked down to Friday, I played my part at home flawlessly. I made dinner, rubbed her shoulders when she complained about stress, smiled as she planned a spa day with the girls. Every kindness I offered was another brick in the wall she didn't know she was about to hit full speed. The morning it was all set to happen, she kissed me goodbye on her way to the office, humming to herself. I watched her drive off, my heart hammering against my ribs like it was trying to break free. Then I packed a bag. Not in a panic. Not in rage. Calmly, methodically. A few clothes, important documents, the essentials. I wasn't planning on leaving forever, not yet. But I needed to be somewhere else when the bomb went off. Somewhere she couldn't reach me immediately. I booked a room at a small boutique hotel downtown, the kind with thick walls and thicker curtains. A place to disappear into for a few days while the dust settled or exploded. By noon, I was checked in, sitting by the window with a coffee, watching the city churn along below. Ordinary people living ordinary lives while my own life prepared to split wide open. At exactly 3:15 p.m., the email sent itself. At 3:19 p.m., Arlena's name popped up on my phone, calling frantically. I let it ring. And ring. And ring. By 3:25 p.m., she was texting. Wade, please call me. We need to talk. Please. Then. It's not what it looks like. Please, Wade, I can explain. Just answer. Please. Then. I love you. Please don't do this. It was a mistake. It meant nothing. I'll do anything. Please. I sat back in the chair, the phone buzzing furiously on the table. For the first time in weeks, I smiled. Not because I enjoyed her pain, I didn't. Despite everything, part of me still loved her. Maybe I always would. But because, finally, the truth was no longer mine alone to carry. It was hers too. And I had only just begun. I didn't answer her calls that night. Not the 100 panic texts. Not the desperate voicemails where she swung wildly between sobbing apologies and shaky anger. I sat in that dim hotel room, lights off, just the soft glow of the city bleeding through the curtains, and listened to my life unravel on repeat. And somewhere in the middle of it all, a strange calm settled over me. I wasn't reacting anymore. I wasn't thrashing in confusion or drowning in betrayal. I was simply watching. Like a man who had finally accepted he was living in a house made of glass and someone had just thrown the first stone. By morning, her messages had slowed from frantic to hollow. The last one simply said, I'm going to the house. Please be there. We need to fix this. Fix this. As if trust was something you could hammer back together once it splintered apart. I didn't rush. I showered slowly, packed my things, checked out of the hotel with a polite nod to the clerk who had no idea what private war I was walking back into. Driving home felt like a funeral march, every familiar street somehow colder now, sharper at the edges. When I pulled into the driveway, Arlena's car was already there. The porch light was on even though the sun was out, a flickering beacon of misplaced hope. I stepped inside and found her sitting on the couch, hands clenched around a mug she wasn't drinking from. Her makeup was smudged, hair pulled back in a messy knot. She looked small. Deflated. She jumped up the moment she saw me. Wade, please, she said, her voice cracking. I can explain everything. I shut the door behind me carefully, like sealing the airlock on a sinking ship. Go ahead, I said, my voice flat. Unreadable. And she did. Oh, how she did. The retreat was real, technically. Some women had gone. But Brendan had been there too, leading a relationship healing workshop she hadn't bothered to mention. She claimed it started as innocent conversations about marriage struggles, about finding yourself again, about reconnecting with the parts you lose in long relationships. But it got complicated, she whispered, twisting the mug in her hands. He listened to me, Wade. He made me feel seen. And I got confused. It was stupid. It didn't mean anything. I stared at her for a long moment. You were confused? I said quietly. Is that what you call wrapping yourself around him like he was your husband? Tears welled up in her eyes, but I didn't move to comfort her. Not this time. She had made her choice clear the second she chose to slip out of my arms and into his. I never stopped loving you, she choked out. I swear. It was a moment. A stupid, weak moment. Moments. Dances. Laughing in firelight. Whispers shared too closely. Long weekends hidden in cabins deep in the woods. All those weren't accidents. They were decisions. Choices repeated until they became her second life. I need you to leave, I said finally, my voice calm even as my chest burned. I can't even look at you right now. Her face crumpled like a paper doll caught in the rain. Please, Wade. Don't throw us away. We can fix this. Therapy, counseling, anything you want. You threw it away, I said, cutting her off. You just didn't bother telling me. She broke then, really broke, collapsing back onto the couch and sobbing into her hands. It should have made me feel powerful. Vindicated. Something. But instead, it just made the hollowness inside me yawn wider. I didn't yell. I didn't slam doors. I just turned and walked upstairs, leaving her crying in the living room that used to be ours. In our bedroom, I sat down on the edge of the bed and stared at the framed photo on the nightstand, our wedding day. Her eyes locked on mine, that same smile that used to mean forever. How funny, I thought bitterly, that you could capture a lie so perfectly in a single photograph. Downstairs, the house was silent now. No more sobbing. No movement. I half expected her to be gone when I went back down, to find just a note and apology scrawled across the counter. But when I finally descended the stairs, she was still there. Sitting very still. waiting. And it hit me then, this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. I leaned against the railing of the staircase, arms folded across my chest, while Arlena sat frozen on the couch like she was afraid even breathing too loud might shatter whatever thin layer of hope she was clinging to. The house, our house, buzzed with a silence so heavy it felt physical. She finally broke it, her voice raw. Please don't throw away everything we built, Wade. One mistake doesn't erase everything we've been through. I didn't answer immediately. I was still weighing it all in my mind, weighing her, this version of her I didn't recognize. The woman who had wept in my arms when her father died, who had clung to me after her first big job loss, who had promised under an autumn sky to be faithful through better and worse. Was that woman still somewhere underneath the wreckage? Or had she been gone longer than I wanted to admit? You're not sorry for what you did, I said finally, my voice quiet but cutting. You're sorry you got caught. Her lip trembled, and for a second I thought she might deny it. Spin some story. Rewrite reality into something softer for herself. But instead, she dropped her head into her hands, shoulders shaking, and that, more than anything, was my answer. I turned away and started to walk toward the front door. I needed air. I needed distance. But before I could leave, she called out behind me. There's something else you should know. I stopped, hand on the doorknob, heart thudding. She stood slowly, like moving through water, her voice barely above a whisper. It wasn't just once. It wasn't just that weekend. The floor seemed to tilt under my feet. She wiped at her face with the sleeve of her sweater. It started months ago. After my birthday. After that night when you fell asleep early and forgot about our plans. I was hurt. Stupid. And Brendan, he was just there. I squeezed my eyes shut for a moment, feeling the full weight of her words crush down on me. Months. Not a moment of weakness, not a slip of judgment, but a sustained choice. A second relationship. A hidden life parallel to ours. And I kept telling myself it didn't matter, she said, her voice cracking. That it was just attention. That it didn't mean anything real. But it got out of hand. I didn't know how to stop it. You didn't want to stop it, I said, my voice sharp now, harder than before. She flinched like I had struck her. And for the first time, maybe, I truly saw her, not the Arlena I had loved and built a life with, but the version of her that had quietly grown in the dark places of our marriage. The part of her that craved something I could never give. Something no one could give because it wasn't about love at all, it was about needing to feel new. Important. Desired. And now she was standing here, trying to gather up the broken pieces like spilled water, pretending there was still something left to save. I think you should leave, I said, my voice cold, final. She opened her mouth, maybe to argue, maybe to beg. But whatever words she had died on her lips when she saw my face. She nodded slowly, brokenly, and without another word, she walked past me, grabbed her keys off the counter, and stepped into the bright, pitiless afternoon. I didn't watch her drive away. I couldn't. Instead, I turned back into the hollow shell of the house we had built together. Everything looked the same, the framed photos, the furniture, the little knickknacks gathered from vacations and anniversaries, but it all felt like a museum now. A shrine to a life that no longer existed. I sat down heavily on the living room floor, back against the wall, knees drawn up. For a while, I just sat there, staring blankly ahead, feeling too much and nothing all at once. And then the doorbell rang. Sharp. Unexpected. It cut through the silence like a blade. Still numb, I forced myself up, walked to the door, and opened it. And standing there was Brendan. In the flesh. Wearing a smug, almost pitying smile. Hey, man, he said, as if we were old friends. I figured we should talk. For a second, I just stood there, gripping the edge of the door, blinking like I wasn't sure if I was hallucinating. Brendan looked exactly like he did in the photos, relaxed, confident, disgustingly at ease. His shirt sleeves were rolled up casually, his sunglasses hooked into the collar. He might as well have been dropping by to borrow a tool, not standing at the threshold of the marriage he helped destroy. I didn't say anything. Neither did he. He just tilted his head slightly, as if sizing me up, as if amused by the fact that I hadn't already slammed the door in his face. You don't have anything to say? He asked eventually, chuckling under his breath like the whole thing was a private joke. I thought you'd be more of a screamer. I could have hit him. God knows, every muscle in my body wanted to. But instead, I stepped back, letting the door swing wider. Come in, I said, voice flat. His eyebrows lifted, clearly surprised. You sure? I'm sure, I said. He shrugged and walked inside, hands tucked into his pockets like he owned the place already. I shut the door softly behind him, locking it with a quiet click. For a moment, we just stood there, two men in the ruins of the life one of them had detonated. Brendan wandered casually into the living room, glancing at the photos on the mantel. One of our wedding day. One of our trip to Charleston. Another from a Christmas party years ago, Arlena beaming with her arms slung around my waist. Nice house, he said. Too bad you didn't keep her happy enough to stay. That was the first real crack he showed, the first glimpse of the rot beneath the smirk. The arrogance, the smugness, the absolute certainty that he was better, stronger, more deserving. You think this was about me not keeping her happy? I asked quietly. He turned, grinning like a man about to deliver a sermon to a fool. Look, man. Women like Arlena? They're not built for routine. You can't just give them security and expect that to be enough. They need adventure. They need to feel wanted. Desired. You gave her comfort. I gave her fire. There it was. His truth served with a smirk and the stench of cheap victory. And you thought, I said slowly, walking toward him, that meant you won? He laughed, a low, cocky sound. Didn't I? I stopped a few feet away from him, studying the man who thought he'd beaten me. And then I smiled. No, I said softly. You didn't. He frowned slightly, the first hairline fracture in his armor. She's leaving, isn't she? He said. Packing up your little suburban life to come start over with me? I shook my head. You don't understand anything, do you? His frown deepened. What the hell are you talking about? I reached into my back pocket and pulled out the thick envelope I had prepared the night before. I had thought long and hard about whether I'd use it, and when Brendan showed up at my door, it was like fate handed me the perfect opportunity. I tossed it onto the coffee table between us. It landed with a heavy slap of finality. Inside were printouts, photos of Brendan with other women, other married women, screenshots of conversations, payment logs, dating app profiles where he described himself as a professional side piece for the adventurous wife. Everything neatly cataloged by my investigator. Brendan stared at it, then up at me, the smirk finally slipping. I wonder, I said thoughtfully, how Arlena would feel if she knew she wasn't special. That she was just another notch. Another conquest. You wouldn't, he said, his voice low, dangerous. I smiled wider. I already have. His face paled just a little, just enough. You're bluffing. No, I said, stepping closer. I sent it all to her work email. To her personal phone. To her best friend. Even to her mother. For the first time, Brendan looked rattled. He took a step back, bumping into the coffee table, knocking the envelope onto the floor. You can leave now, I said, my voice calm, final. Before you embarrass yourself further. He stared at me, pure hatred swimming in his eyes, but he didn't say another word. He turned on his heel and stalked out of the house, slamming the door behind him so hard the windows rattled. I stood there for a long time after he left, the echo of the slam reverberating through the empty house. Maybe this wasn't revenge. Maybe it wasn't even justice. But it was truth. And sometimes truth was the only weapon you needed. Upstairs, my phone buzzed again. Arlena. Still trying to reach me. Still clinging to something already dead. I didn't rush to answer. I wasn't ready yet. Not until she saw everything. Not until she realized just how completely she had lost. The house was silent again after Brendan left, but it was a different kind of silence now, cleansed, almost sacred. Like the walls themselves were relieved, no longer forced to absorb the weight of 1,000 unsaid things. I stood in the living room for a long moment, staring at the door he had slammed behind him. Then slowly, I turned away, walking upstairs to my bedroom. Every step felt heavier and lighter at the same time. Heavier because I was walking away from a life I had poured myself into, lighter because I was finally walking towards something else. Something honest. On the nightstand, my phone buzzed again. Arlena. Another call. Another text. Another voicemail. I let it sit there, vibrating uselessly against the wood until finally it stopped. I sat on the bed, feeling the emptiness around me like a second skin. But instead of despair, a strange, unexpected peace settled over me. I realized I wasn't afraid anymore. Not of being alone. Not of starting over. Not of losing what I thought I couldn't live without. Arlena had made her choices. Brendan had made his. And now I was making mine. The next morning, I packed a single suitcase, the essentials. I didn't need much. Clothes. Some old photo albums I wanted to keep. A few books. My grandfather's watch. Everything else could stay. Let the memories rot where they belonged. Before I left, I sat down one last time at the kitchen table and wrote Arlena a letter. Not an angry one. Not a bitter one. Just a final, clear goodbye. Arlena. I loved you. Truly. Deeply. I gave you everything I had, even when I didn't know it wasn't what you needed. You made your choices. I'm making mine. I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for. Goodbye. Wade. I left the letter on the kitchen counter, the place we used to leave notes about groceries, vet appointments, weekend plans. A simple ending in the place where 1,000 simple beginnings had once lived. Then I walked out the door, locking it behind me. And I didn't look back. The next few weeks weren't easy. Healing never is. There were nights when the loneliness hit like a physical punch, when I stared at the ceiling and wondered if I had made a mistake walking away. But those moments passed, little by little, like a fever breaking. I moved into a small apartment downtown, a place with creaky floors, too many stairs, and windows that let the morning light flood in. It wasn't fancy. It wasn't impressive. But it was mine. Every battered piece of furniture, every scuffed corner, it was a life being rebuilt on my own terms. I reconnected with old friends I had drifted from during the marriage. Took up running again, something I hadn't done in years. Volunteered at the local shelter on weekends. And slowly, quietly, life began to hum again. Not the frantic, desperate hum of trying to hold something broken together, but the steady, hopeful hum of something real being born. One Saturday morning, while grabbing coffee at a little bookstore cafe near my apartment, I met someone. Her name was Ivy. She had kind eyes, a quick laugh, and a habit of reading the last page of a book first because she hated surprises. We talked for an hour that first day, then met for lunch the next week, and then dinner the week after that. I didn't rush anything. I didn't cling. I didn't pretend the past hadn't happened. But for the first time in a long time, I felt something stir inside me, something gentle and real. Not fireworks. Not chaos. Peace. And when Ivy smiled at me across the table, when she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear and asked me about my favorite childhood memory, I realized something. I hadn't lost everything. I had simply made room for something better. For someone better. For a future that belonged entirely to me and to whoever was brave enough to walk it with me.